Hey, welcome back, everyone. I want to remind everyone to go to itpro.tv/startup security. Check out our fine friends at itpro.tv. Use the discount code SS30. Try it free for 7 days. Get 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. And do the supervisor portal. Encourage your employer to purchase a supervisor portal so you and all your fellow coworkers can get access to an awesome library of training. You will be happy that you did that. Provided you can convince your employer. Just tell them that Paul and the gang from Security Weekly sent you. You'll be fine.
There you go. I think that's the right answer.
How about that? So, Michael, lots of really cool startup news this week.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, let me start by saying every time, right, this is why we bring this up. We'll pull up an article. Oh, IPOs are off. Oh, the tech market's in a slump. Oh, cybersecurity's yeah, stop. All right, let's open up Black Duck. Black Duck. I didn't realize they'd been around since 2002, Paul. You and I came across them at a conference just this year, and they hand out little black ducks, little ducks. These guys snapped up by Synopsys. $565 million. Now, since 2002, they've taken on $75.5 million in funding, and Owler estimates them at $55 million in revenue. So $565 million sale, depending on how you cut that. I mean, that's good. That's a good price, and that seems like a pretty good exit. What are your thoughts on this?
I thought it was interesting. Synopsys is like listed on Owler as competing with like chip companies and stuff. I'm not sure exactly what Synopsys does, to be quite honest with you. Do you know what they do?
I tried figuring. Yeah, I tried wrapping my head around it as well, and it really didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Accelerate innovation in the global electronics market. Computer integrated systems design company.
The only thing I can think.
Play. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, no, yours first, and then maybe I'll sound. Maybe I'll stop because you'll be more intelligent.
No, I don't know about that, but I can see that if Synopsys is helping companies design electronics and there's a software aspect to it, that Black Duck would play very nicely in that as you design a system and the software that goes in that system, you can make sure it doesn't have vulnerabilities, especially ones that are known, because the IoT devices, or embedded computers as we used to call them, tend to borrow a lot of libraries from
there you go.
Share a lot of libraries, and so if that one's vulnerable, you can make sure it's not in the chain. But to pay $500+ million for a company that maybe you're just going to integrate into your offering, I'm thinking that they're going to leave them selling in the enterprise after I saw the sale price. It wasn't a closeout sale. Like if they got a bargain, I mean, they might do both, right? But they're not going to take out.
Yeah, that definitely does not feel like that was an acqui-hire. That doesn't feel like it was a fire sale or things were bad for them. But what's interesting is, so I'm looking at this Xconomy article, and it says, all right, founded in 1986, Synopsys helps design and test silicon chips, and also works in application security testing. But one of the things that I think is interesting, and I think what you hit on is exactly the direction I was going to go. We're starting to see now where the chip manufacturers, I mean, we just talked about the IoT platform that ARM's advancing, that they kind of look at it now and they go, oh, there's got to be a different way to do it. Oh, and you know what? In fact, if you think back, we covered this on Hack Naked this week. We're going to not just give you the models and we'll give you the code. We'll give you the threat models and analysis on it. We'll give you the best practices. We're going to show you how to do it better. So I could see now a play where if you're helping people do chip design, the chips now, if you think about this, I mean, we talked, and you and I have had lots of great conversations with people who looked at stuff that in the 70s and 80s they wanted to do, but our processor power, our memory, our network speeds, they just weren't there. A lot of stuff in the late 90s, when I got started in this, it sounded good. We tried it, but the reality is it didn't work well. And now, 20 years later, 25 years later, we're seeing that work. Why? What's changed? I can offload a bunch of different stuff on the chip. I can do all these different things. We're building like the Apple's got the Enclave, and then I've already forgot what Intel's is called. But everybody's got like these different types of processors and coprocessors and security modules and all sorts of other stuff on it. So if you're in the business of being able to test that and to automate that testing and to speed that to market, that's really cool. And for a company that generated $2.5 billion of revenue, or almost $2.5 billion of revenue, $565 million. I mean, it's a big price. But this might see a big chunk of their business. So I'm going to be really curious, as you pointed out, does this now move them into the enterprise play? or does this potentially give them an advantage in the embedded devices now called the IoT market? So I think it's interesting, but it's a successful exit. And that's a, so here's a company that they've been around since 2002. We talk about category kings in that book. They talk about successful exits are typically within the 6 to 10 year range. Well, we're at the 15-year range, but man, it looks good across the board for them.
WatchGuard makes an IPO. That's cool.
Remember when their box used to be, they had the black, they were red. They came like WatchGuard was different because their boxes, instead of just being blinky lights, they were red cases.
Right.
So I thought this was interesting because it was WatchGuard falls for the IPO. So I looked at it, I went, okay, so I get that WatchGuard's still around, but wait, they're filing for an IPO now? Well, they did. They filed for an IPO. They IPO'd in 1999, which kind of matched it wasn't like I tracked it and I went, didn't they IPO before? But I was like, that seems what they were delisted in 2006. So this is essentially an IPO again. Now, what's interesting then is that when you go dig into it, they've got private equity money in it. So one of the things we talk about a lot is that you can have venture capital and private equity. You can have both. There's now the ICOs, the initial coin offerings. There's all sorts of other strategies, and that's what we always keep looking at here. So, don't call it a comeback, but WatchGuard is putting themselves back on the market with an IPO, and they're doing a unified threat management stuff. I've always got the sense that they're kind of an SMB play, but this is a space I know for a while you looked at. Is that about right?
Well, and I think some of the SMB are probably trying to dabble in what I'm hearing this year being called the small enterprise, right? And I think that can take many shapes and forms as well.
That's interesting. That just feels like somebody in marketing trying to confuse me, but maybe there's merit to it. Do you like it? Let's stay on that for just a second.
Maybe there's something between mid-market and enterprise. They call it small enterprise. I think it's just further market segmentation.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily bad.
Because it lets them grow their product line, but they don't have to grow their product line to put it, drop it in and compete with Cisco in a Fortune 1000 or Fortune 2000. They can scale it back and say, well, it's a small enterprise, which I think I don't think it's marketing. I think I like that strategy.
Okay, now that you're talking it through with me, so what you're saying is I need enterprise grade management and enterprise grade application, but I'm not a Fortune 2000, so I don't need all the bells and whistles, everything else. It needs to be able to work. But I'm also, you're probably not my sole source provider. So I might not have my 50 vendors. I might have 5 to 10. You need to play nice, and you need to be a part of my solution because I'm getting there, baby, growing bigger. I like it. SailPoint, $100 million IPO, or at least that's what they've listed. They've taken on roughly $26 million in funding since 2005. So here we are 12 years later. If they are not the category king, they're certainly up there. I know CyberArk is a competitor. CyberArk is definitely up there. If they're not the category king, somebody is. When we look at identity, there's a lot in, as we talk with Jonathan Sander a lot, if he's listening today, he's probably just cringing at what I just said. Seriously, take that webinar. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met. Identity is a big field. Here's the point. It's hot, and it's going to stay hot. So congratulations to SailPoint for the plans for their IPO, and we're going to watch how that goes. I think what bodes well for them, Forescout. So we talked about them a couple weeks ago. And on their first day of trading, they were up, I think it was about 16%. So that's really good. I mean, you'll see a lot of people like recently Snap, right? They ended down in trading, and that basically says, look, you overpriced it. You didn't do as well as you wanted. Forescout actually did really well. They raised about 116 million. They sold 5.3 million shares. But here's the quote that I pulled because I thought it was really interesting. Forescout had $167 million in sales last year compared to $126 million for 2015. That's great. But losses grew to 75 million last year, up from 27 million in 2015. So your losses basically tripled.
Losses as in they lost customers didn't resign?
Well, typically what that means is if you're looking at your losses, it might be that you had new liabilities. Like there's a lot of things that come into the losses. And to be fair, I didn't dig into this, and I could have. So I'm now slightly surprised I didn't.
If they're public now, we have all the information available to us, right?
Yeah, and they had to disclose that. Now remember they did kind of like a clandestine IPO. There's a way that they were able to do it both quicker and a little bit quieter. But if your losses are growing, what that means is that you're not making as much money. So like typically what'll happen is they'll say, look at that. We jumped our revenue up by not quite 50%, like 40%. But then you have to say, okay, well, and what kind of losses? So maybe, Paul, when we look at the contribution margin, they were flying a bigger sales team, or they were making a better deal, or so you may find that actually customers renewed, but they knew they were getting ready for an IPO, so they offered them a sweetheart deal.
Yeah.
And I don't look. I'm not knocking Forescout on this, but this is something I see a lot in these big vendors. Is that they walk in and they start out. It's kind of like buying an RV or a car. You're not going to pay MSRP. So I come in and I say, look, we sell you this. It's $100 a seat, but I can drop it to 60. That's your opening position. By the way, if you do that, please stop. Just have some value. Go in. I mean, why was it priced at 100? Like, let's stop the games. But that's what, like, when I'm reading this, you increase your sales by 40%, but you tripled your losses grew by 300%. Okay, that tells me that you were getting ready. You were making all this stuff work. Now, here's the thing that I think is interesting. We are on a path towards profitability, said the CEO. One of the things I have learned looking at this is that there are certain models where you're doing subscription-based work, and Forescout's trying to position itself as an Internet of Things security company. It is quite possible that they've made a series of investments and one-time charges and a bunch of capital costs to launch new services or reconfigure the way that they do stuff.
If that
and there's a
pivot to
cost.
But is that pivot to IoT on the flip side of that, Michael? Is that just they're changing their messaging? Their technology is still the same, but their messaging is just saying IoT, because it's still NAC, dude. Like, it's still
I was gonna say,
authenticating devices to the network. They're just like, oh, when your IoT stuff comes on the network, we can help you with that too. And they didn't really have to make a huge technology investment to claim in their messaging that we help with IoT. And oh, by the way, I'm seeing this trend of companies that are saying they're in one space and pivoting now into IoT. I think it's risky. I think there are players out there that will do it and do it very well. But I think some are going to fail because they jumped on the IoT bandwagon.
Yeah,
I don't think Forescout's going to fail.
I think you said it well, and I'm going to be really curious to see where it goes, and we are going to now pay attention to how they continue to do and where it goes. Look, as you and I talk about all the time, we're an IoT security company. Cool. What problem do you solve? IoT security. I don't even know what that means.
What is that?
Right. So we'll see where it goes. All right. Booz Allen, they acquired Morphic. Morphic, cybersecurity platform, offers managed detection, incident response, threat intelligence, reverse engineering for enterprises. On record, they got about $10 million in funding. That was just a Series A, September 2015. Now, something I know you've got some thoughts on this. It was undisclosed. That typically, to me, signals maybe not as good an exit as everybody wanted. And the general guidance is your funding round should last you 2 years. Doesn't always, right? And there's a number of cases where very good reasons why it doesn't, and there's a number of very bad reasons why it doesn't. And there's just a bunch of stuff. There's no science to this. Actually, there probably is. But so here we are, 2 years later. Basically, if they did it right, they're about to run out of cash. So either they get acquired, they get another round. They got acquired, but nobody wanted to talk about the deals, and they got acquired by a pretty large government contractor.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Well, so what I think is interesting about this one, and here's my crazy theory, Michael, which I think is kind of fun. And I don't mean any harm, or I'm not knocking either of these two companies, because they, in all likelihood, could be really awesome companies. I thought it was interesting that a services company took $10 million in funding. Everything I read, Morphic was a services company, which I thought was interesting. That's pretty risky, taking $10 million if you're, so you got to have some good things in the pipeline to recoup that investment for your investor. And one of the things that they did, so they took their Series A in September 2015. In around the same time, about a year later in 2016, they got officially approved as an NSA contractor, at which time I'm thinking they started competing with Booz Allen. And a year after that, Booz Allen goes, you know what, we're just going to buy you.
Yep.
That was just my take on it. Just from reading the news that surrounds it, it very well could have happened completely different. It could have been a very, even though it was undisclosed, Michael, it could have been a great deal for both parties, right? They could have been working together.
Yeah, and that's something we talked about.
They're both NSA contractors. Yeah. Maybe they were working together on stuff, and they're just like, hey, you know what? It makes sense to sell.
And I think it's a really good point, because when you look at the way that, right, and you've clearly been exposed to it, there's primes, there's subprimes, it's a myriad of stuff. Then to be able to work at the agency and get stuff done there, obviously we've got friends of the family here that have a lot more experience at it than you and I do. Lots of neat stuff happening there. And so, yes, I think what you laid out makes sense. And by the way, there are a lot of times it makes sense not to disclose the terms
Right.
because there's other companies, you don't want them to know what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Totally makes sense. I'm still going to stick with, if it's undisclosed, it's probably more of a, hey, how about we just all work together? And it
Yeah.
could be a good deal for everybody,
Right.
but it didn't create any new value. All right. Biologic. All right. So I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at this yet. I'm going to just go out and say it. So is it Intezer? Is that how you would
No
say
idea. Intezer is how I would say it.
Israeli startup, $8 million Series A. Cybersecurity company specializes in offering biological immune system-based malware analysis and detection to address threats. Feels a lot like our good friends at Minerva to a certain extent, at least based on that description. And I went to their website, and it was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. What they're basically saying, if I got it right, was we're going to help you with malware analysis and detection, but we're going to do it more like an immune system. So we're going to learn from biology, and we're going to apply it to what we're doing here.
Which I hate that analogy for so many reasons. Anyway.
I think it opens you up to a lot of derision and a lot of confusion. I think you've got to tell that story really tight to make it work. And when I looked over their website, I went, but an $8 million Series A is not laughable. That is a big ask. So either, and they had a $2 million seed round. So either they've got some big pockets and they're doing some pretty awesome stuff and they're going to hit it hard, or I don't actually even know the or. That's interesting to me. So no B4, $30 million Series B round. I tend not to talk very often about security awareness companies. If you call it security awareness training, you make me want to bash my head into a wall. There's awareness and there's training. You can have security awareness and you can have security training. Security awareness training would be training me to be how to be. I don't even like. I just it's. Every time I bring this up, somebody wants to sit me down and say, "But Michael, that's just how our industry is." Right. This is why nobody pays attention to it, except for $30 million Series B. So they've been in business for a long time. They're not new. Stu's been doing this for a while. I know some of the folks on this team I really respect. So I like the people. $8 million Series A. So that's a huge open. Then they did a $5.2 million equity round about a year later in February of 2017, and they just added $30 million in a Series B. That's a huge Series B, and typically in a Series B, you're ending your early stage round of funding. So what that means is your product market fit should about be right. You got your team in place, you understand how you're going to market, you understand what you're selling, and you're ready to get into growth mode. And based on how long they've been around and what they're doing, I mean, I probably just make a phone call or two, and maybe we'll try to follow up on this. My take on this is that's a pretty big round because I feel that they're mature enough that they're probably moving in the growth mode. Like that almost feels like a growth mode round, not a hey, I think we're going to get it figured out round.
Despite not separating awareness and training, which is all likelihood just a marketing and messaging thing, the problem they solve and the solution is pretty straightforward, right? It's a problem that every enterprise, every business has. My users get tricked with email phishing attacks. We can help with that problem. And everyone has that problem. Everyone needs to solve that problem. It's a growing problem today. Hence, I think them moving into growth mode and taking 30 million Series B makes total sense. If their solution works, and obviously they must have a pretty good customer base to jump to that Series B.
Yeah, and so definitely people to pay attention to. Last of the busy week, Recorded Future, $25 million Series E. So this is interesting. So that's a big. I mean, when you're into your Series E, I mean, your growth stage, like that basically means you got it dialed in, baby. You're growing, and you're looking for some sort of an exit. Either you're going to pop and get an IPO, right? So by the way, SailPoint only took on $26 million of funding over the last 12 years, and they just filed for a $100 million IPO. All right. Well, Recorded Future took on $25 million of Series E. That's not huge for a growth mode. I mean, if you go look at some of these, tech unicorns, their Series E are like $100 million rounds. $25 million, it's not sneezable. That's a good chunk of change. But since 2009, they've only raised $57.9 million. So here's what I like about this. That makes them still ripe for an acquisition. They did not price themselves out of a marketplace. Right. I didn't look at and I didn't try to calculate out any of the valuations on the company. And I wish I
Yeah.
was connected enough I could make a couple phone calls and tell us, but we're not there yet. Give us another year. The show will be your go-to resource
Mhm.
for that. But I think it's interesting. I think it's one of these fields where you talk about threat intelligence, and now you're talking about, well, is it threat intelligence or is it risk intelligence? And what does it mean to be intelligence? And how does it help an operator? And is it helping our SOCs? Recorded Future is one of the companies that's kind of hanging in there. We've talked about some others that it's kind of like, so are you a threat intel company, or are you an endpoint company, or are you a SOC automation company, or you
Yeah.
or
No,
whatever else?
I think they're pivoting outside of the threat intelligence market for sure, and they've got some interesting technology that I saw at Black Hat that makes me think they put a lot into research and development, and could be that the E round, a lot of that's going to go to sales and marketing to push them into the to getting a larger
Into that
market share.
into that
Yeah.
next jump. Yep. Yep. I just tell you what, they were very kind. About a year ago, they took me through a demo, and I came away thoroughly impressed.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
And they're the folks on that deep web stuff, and so they said, well, here, and what I really liked was the folks that I talked to. They were able to tell me really quickly the problem that they solved, and they say, here, let me show you a demo. Let me give you an account. Let me walk you through it. And it was one of those things where I went, wow, I could totally see how the more you understood your business, the more you could set this up and really drag some stuff through it. So, I mean, I was kind of impressed with what I saw. So, congratulations to them. I mean, everybody here. I mean, I think you and I are going to tell it like it is always. It's in our DNA. But, this represents a lot of good stuff happening in the security industry.
Hmm.
And we just talked about all the good things that can happen in the security community. In terms of our updates, and where we're heading. I've been so excited I couldn't stop it. So the new workshop is launched, and I've gone out and we started working on folks a couple times. Here's the interesting thing, Paul. We've talked consistently now for the last year and a half when we look at these stories, and we keep saying to people, pick one thing, pick your niche, pick your one thing, get really good at it. I think people have heard me talk before about the distinction between knowing of something and actually knowing it. It's that, oh, I'm familiar with that versus having the competence in it. I'm guilty of that too, because I've known for the better part of a decade, 12 years, 15 years, the sooner you find a niche and get really good at it, the better everything will be around it. And I've always said, yeah, I totally want to do that. Oh, but I'm also going to do this and this and this and this. But I'll pretend that they're all connected. What's happened is people have asked me for a way to make it work. And without getting too deep into it for here, but if anybody's interested, I'm happy to talk to them. I figured out a way, Paul, to get people invited ahead of time. And when we do it, it's called a workshop. It's not training. We're actually working through an issue. Now, do we do training? Of course, I interleave the training. I can give the training to people ahead of time so they can read it, they can see it, they can touch it, they can taste it, they can try it. So when we're together and we're working through it, we're really helping them solve a problem, but using some different mental models and using some different systems and using the straight talk framework approach to solve the value proposition. We call it identifying the value proposition. And what I looked at were the biggest challenges that I came up with teams over the last 2 or 3 years. But here's what I'm finding, Paul. I'm getting more excited, not less. And the more I get done with it, the more I see there's so much more that we can do with just this one workshop. The more I talk about it, the more people get excited about it. The easier it is to explain to them the things that we're putting together. The easier it is to do the prep work. The easier it is to go through it. And here's the beauty. No two workshops are the same, because you're going to have a different team. Even if you have the same team, you're going to have a different problem. Your understanding is going to be different. Paul, I'm on fire. I'm so excited about it.
Hmm.
And then, of course, that carries over. So I've talked to a number of people who I talked to over the summer, and they said, wow, this makes so much more sense. Okay, so let me get something scheduled with you. I get it now. I understand it now. You sound so excited about it, Michael. This is going to be great. But then you go and you work with the teams, and it is great. Watching people solve problems and figure stuff out and realize why they got stuck.
Hmm.
Oh, so you asked me how I'm doing. I'm good. Now, that came I've been promising everybody updates to the Straight Talk framework. Okay, that's not done yet. And I've been promising people updates to the website. And on the website, we're going to have a new resource on identifying the value proposition. Now that's done, except for the website's not done. I've been using that in the workshop, getting great feedback on it. So I'm going to take some of those pieces. We're going to put them on the website. Anybody shortly will be able to sign up for that. Some of you have sent me really polite messages saying, hey, you took down the sign up and the Straight Talk stuff. Yes, it's all coming back. Chances are, so I got a workshop next week after that. So between there and around Thanksgiving timeframe, if you're here in the U.S., basically November, looking to do the website, and between November end of the year, work on getting an updated version of the Straight Talk framework together. But we'll have the value prop stuff done first, and then I'm really just, somebody asked me the other day, Paul, what are the ways to work with you? And classically, you would say, well, I could do speaking and training, and I could do consulting, and we could do coaching and whatever else. Yeah, I'm pretty much down to this workshop is the right way to do it. And once you've had that experience with me, I have an executive coaching program for both individuals and teams, and we have some different advisory services we can offer people. It really turns out, though, that the teams that go through this just a day with me, totally different experience. So I feel like when you say, like, how's our journey? Paul, it's coming together. And I'm getting time now to focus on it deeply. So I'm seeing the connections. I mean, I have so much that I want to write about, so much I want to do, so much I want to explore. And of course, it's all going to benefit what we're doing here. So my journey I'm on a good place, and I'm on a good roll. So I'm enjoying it. How about you, man?
Things are going really well. We've got some awesome conversations that are happening that I can't really disclose publicly yet. But, it ties just constantly working on our MVP messaging, go-to-market strategy, and how that's evolving and changing over time or not. And really, that's what it comes down to. So I will provide more details as they become available. How about that?
I like it. It's you're teasing us.
That's right. So it's a tease.
I'm going to have to stay tuned.
Yeah, and you'll be here in studio next week.
I was wondering if we were going to tell people or not, but yes,
so
my
excited.
workshop is in Boston, and so we've worked it out. I'm going to head there, and I think people might even get a chance to see me on a couple shows. I'm going to get back to Security Weekly because I won't have to worry about the kids. And
it's going to be awesome. You're going to be live. You'll be live here in the studio for the first time. We've never done a live podcast together.
We have not. So it's going to be awesome. A week of firsts. It's going to be a good week. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. And that's going to give us a chance too, because you and I always joke. People always say, "Oh, you must talk to each other all the time." Not as much as we want, but next week we're going to get some time, and we've got a bunch of ideas.
Are you going to smoke cigars? Sometimes. Are you going to smoke cigars when you come here? Are we both going to be having a cigar during Startup Security Week?
Yeah.
That's going to be epic.
It's been a while.
That's going to be.
You have to help me pace myself.
I will. I'm your coach in the cigar smoking extravaganza that will happen.
Well, then, yeah, I'm on board. So, yeah, we're going to brainstorm some ideas for next year.
You'll be fine as long as you don't drink an entire bottle of wine, like apparently you're known for now or something.
I may have not paced myself very well the other day on an empty stomach and reminded myself that in your 40s, you don't feel like you're in your 20s.
It hurts. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Startup Security Weekly. See you next week, where we'll both be live in studio, so stay tuned.